Get a glimpse of what's in store for the Nittany Lions this season during live coverage of Penn State spring football. Comes your way Saturday, 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 Central. You can only see it on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. And for more on what to watch for, we check in with a Penn State insider. She does it as well as anybody covering the Nittany Lions for The Athletic. Audrey Snyder joining us on Big Ten today. Hey, Audrey, one of the biggest offseason storylines, the hiring of Manny Diaz, former head coach at Miami, to replace Brent Pry as defensive coordinator. How do you sense his philosophy will be similar to or different than the one that Pry used?
You know, the word we keep hearing about Manny Diaz is aggressive, aggressive in everything that he's doing. I mean, it was really a great hire for Penn State. You lose Brent Pry, who has been with James Franklin for the entirety of James's time at Penn State, and of course before that as well. But, you know, to me, it makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that we kept hearing throughout the process of bringing Manny Diaz in was that they were going to try to keep everything as similar as possible. Now, there's, of course, going to be some changes. There always will be. But philosophically, they wanted to try and keep it as aligned and as similar as it was with Pry. I do think one of the interesting things that we're going to continue to see play out with Manny Diaz is Penn State's ability to use the transfer portal and to use it as a tool to try and bolster this roster. I mean, they've got a need at defensive end that they've been trying to fix and trying to make some adjustments to, and they have that in the wings coming in. So absolutely, that was a strength for Manny Diaz at Miami, and I think Penn State's going to continue to try and do that as well.
Certainly trying to shore up that edge rush position, which has been a position of strength. But I think there's no question, Audrey, the bigger issue is at linebacker, where there's not a ton of depth and there's a lot of questions, especially at that Mike linebacker position, which is so important in that aggressive defense where he has to make so many calls, make so many plays. Is there someone on the inside track at that position?
Yeah, a guy that we've heard a lot about this spring has been Tyler Elsdon. You know, you look at Elsdon, you look at Kobe King. Those are the two guys that are going to be competing for that spot. But you're exactly right. I mean, so much is going to fall on their shoulders, and that is not a position where Penn State has depth or has a ton of experience. I mean, those two guys combined, King took a red shirt last year. We saw his twin brother, Kalen King, a good bit, but we didn't see much of Kobe, who preserved his red shirt. So those guys combined have like a handful of tackles at Penn State. So obviously not ideal, but I mean, the good thing is you're going to have some talent around them. And I do think that, you know, this defense should be the strength of Penn State yet again this season.
Are there any other players, Audrey, that you are hearing from the coaching staff that have maybe stood out or been pleasant surprises throughout spring ball, doing things that perhaps they didn't anticipate?
Yeah, I'll go with a couple of safeties. Zakee Wheatley, a redshirt freshman, is somebody that we've heard a ton about. Teammates have said it's almost like you have a veteran back there that he's making plays. He actually leads the team in takeaways right now heading into Saturday. I believe that number is 5. And then another guy who's not new, but someone who's really stepped into a bigger leadership role is safety Jair Brown. Teammates have raved about him and how he leads and how he's, you know, kind of not afraid to tell and show people and put them in the right spots. So you definitely need that. And Brown credits a lot of that to Jaquan Brisker and how Brisker helped him. So big shoes to fill there, but it seems like they're pretty much going to do it. And another guy, which is really rare to say, but we've heard a ton about freshman defensive tackle Zane Durant, which we're usually not talking about freshman defensive tackles, but he is someone who's really surprised them in a good way so far and is somebody that I think we're going to see in some way, shape, or form this fall.
Let's head to the offensive side of the ball. Sean Clifford is back for a 6th. Christian Veilleux appears to be the solid number 2.
Yes.
With that being known, how likely is it that Pry's recruit Drew Aller redshirts this season?
You know, I think unless something crazy happens, right, I think that's the route you're going to take. And I know that's not what fans want to hear, but I think that's the reality of their situation. I mean, Sean Clifford came back for a reason. And remember, Penn State wanted Sean to come back for a reason. I mean, he is the bridge to whoever comes next, whether that's Veilleux, whether that's Aller, whether that's Bo Pribula. To me, that is more so a conversation for 2023. Now, if there's an injury, or keep in mind the way this schedule lines up for Penn State. They open up with Purdue on the road. They also have to go to Auburn week 3. So if Penn State struggles out of the gate, I do wonder maybe at the midpoint of the season, would we see a change? And a lot of that, again, is going to hinge on how Sean Clifford looks. And that's a mystery, which is not something you want to be saying with a 6th-year quarterback, but that's the reality. That's why there's so much intrigue in the guys behind him. because especially the last 2 years, his play hasn't been up to par. But let's be honest, neither has the rest of the offense. They haven't been able to run the ball. The offensive line has consistently had issues. So now you look at it and you say, okay, year 2 with Mike Yurcich, a lot has to be better and a lot has to be different.
Yurcich and James Franklin have said they will be more committed to running the football in 2022 no matter what. They have vets like Kevon Lee and Devin Ford, but I understand the young guys are making some noise. So what should we know about Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton?
Yeah, I mean, these are the two that fans are very excited about. Nick Singleton was the Gatorade Player of the Year from Pennsylvania at Governor Mifflin High School, so not too far away. But this was a very important one to keep him home. And, you look at Singleton, and he's blown teammates away because he's got a really good background in weight training. And he's somebody that teammates said they kept looking around when they were squatting this winter and like, this freshman's squatting 500 pounds? Like, what in the world? But he's explosive. I mean, teammates were telling us this week that Nick had a run that they believe went for about an 80-yard touchdown. So a couple of the defensive players didn't want to talk too much about that, but they did give us that nugget. So he's impressive. And Kaytron Allen goes by the nickname Fat Man, as somebody that running backs coach Snyder told me ahead of spring ball, hey, don't take this guy for granted. Everybody kind of gets wrapped up in Singleton because he was a 5-star. Well, Kaytron was a 4-star at IMG Academy. So they are loaded in the backfield. But again, how is that offensive line going to be better, going to be improved? And what's that commitment level going to look like? Which, hey, they said they're committed to it, but at this point, you got to kind of see it to believe it after last year.
A lot of gaps to fill in on that offensive line. I know a couple of important transfers coming in, one of whom is not there right now. Perhaps they get some help blocking, and they certainly expect to get some help receiving from that tight end room. I spoke with Franklin and Yurcich on Thursday, and they are raving about their tight end room. Why?
Well, they said the same thing last year. There's a ton of talent in that room. You look at Brenton Strange, you look at Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren, which we saw him use Warren in gadget plays. Then you add Jerry Cross into the mix. But the thing, again, that was so interesting to me last year was the tight end usage. I mean, it was really inconsistent. And you go back to Brenton Strange and how they played against Auburn, and he had this breakout moment, and you thought it was going to lead to more, and then it didn't. So, we heard a lot of this last August about them and the optimism with this tight end room. And I believe it. But again, I think the usage, the offense has to be more efficient. And of course, I'm not saying anything they don't already know, and anybody who's watched this team doesn't know. But yeah, there's a ton of talent in that tight end room, and I absolutely believe that. But again, you got to use it.
So Jahan Dotson is gone, clearing space for, we assume, Parker Washington to be the guy. From what you understand, does he appear to be ready to be a solid every Saturday #1 wide receiver in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I do believe he's special. I mean, I think we saw that in the Outback Bowl where he really stepped up. And it's looked like, from what we've seen in brief snippets of practices, he's had a bit of a light spring, which is kind of what you'd expect, more of that veteran workload. But I do think there's a lot of interesting things that Taylor Stubblefield can and will do with Parker Washington. But another guy who I think a lot of fans are going to be keeping an eye on Saturday is wide receiver Mitchell Tinsley. Comes in from Western Kentucky as a transfer. And this was a guy they really, really wanted to get. They bring him in. He's actually rooming with Sean Clifford. So that's someone who I think is really going to step up. But you look at Parker as the #1, probably Keandre Lambert-Smith as a really solid #2 who's going to take that next step. And then that #3 spot, you've got Tinsley. And you also have Malik Maga, who's fascinating, who does not physically look like anybody else on this roster. He is a very big-bodied receiver. So there's a lot of excitement there, too. But again, what's this rhythm on offense going to look like, and what's the quarterback play going to look like?
Audrey, we've got about a minute left. Let's finish with special teams. James Franklin told me he is legitimately concerned about the loss of Jordan Stout. Said he believes he should be and will be the first specialist taken this year in the draft. Obviously hurts Penn State in the punt game, in the long-range field goal game. Pinniger is back for the shorter field goals, but who's the heir apparent to take over the rest of the kicking game?
They're in a fascinating spot because you look at Sanders Zahedek, who they brought in last cycle, as somebody who they're going to need. And then you look at the punting situation right now, and Alex Paqueta, their freshman, isn't on campus yet, but he's very much going to be in the mix for that job. Could potentially win that job, but right now Barney Amore is the punter. But I agree with James Franklin. Jordan Stout was very special here. You look at what he was able to do. Now, I will say I think the punt god might like a word about that first specialist off the board. But no doubt, Stout adds a ton of value to whatever roster is going to pick him up. And what he did last year as a punter especially was really mind-blowing because we've seen the big leg before, but he really, really did a nice job last year.
Those are James's words, not mine, just to be clear. Audrey Snyder of The Athletic, we appreciate it as always. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow in State College for the spring game.
Absolutely. Thank you.
There's no question, Gopher edge rusher Boye Mafe quickly becoming a name we hear more and more with the NFL draft now less than a week away. You see the numbers, a big reason why the production is there, jumps off the screen. Boye Mafe, a name you will hear called next weekend in Las Vegas. It is time now for today's big interview, and you guessed it. It is with former Gopher edge Boye Mafe. Boye, that draft is now less than 7 days away. I'm sure you're hearing the same thing that we're hearing. You're one of those guys who is garnering more and more interest as the draft draws nearer. So how excited are you to hear who will take you next weekend and where and when you will be going?
I'm really excited. I mean, for me, it's just an opportunity, honestly. And, I can't wait to really see where I end up playing. That's the most exciting part is, a lot of nerves and kind of waiting just to see who calls you. So at this point, I'm just sitting here waiting on that day when I'll get that call. And honestly, it means the world to be able to go through this process and, see what's happening so far and getting to meet all these coaches and teams. And, I just want to see which one picks me at the end of the day.
I think one of the reasons that scouts and GMs have become more and more interested is they look at your career body of work and they see that the production increased each and every year. This past season, you had career highs in basically every meaningful stat. What was the key to your development in Minnesota?
For me, it was, partially me and partially the coaches. Coaches, helped me out through my time and always giving me something to work on every year and every offseason, finding a way to get better. If it's either my IQ of the game or how I played the game or technically how I did my moves or how I played hands, footwork, everything, the whole nine. So just increasing throughout every year and finding ways to get better continuously is what I try to do, and every year finding little things to get better at.
You look back 4 or 5 years ago, and there were a lot of teams coming out of high school that may have passed on you, and I'm sure that those teams regretted passing on you after they had to play against you during your college career. How much did that motivate you throughout your time in Minnesota?
I mean, for me, especially being a homegrown kid from Minnesota at the end of the day, if those other teams didn't really, find interest in me, that's one thing. But for me, just I wanted to go out there and represent for the state. Represent as, being the University of Minnesota, being a local kid, being someone that grew up in this state. Just go out there and play my best ball and represent the state in the highlight. And at the end of the day, show them that Minnesota is not just a, school that's just here. We're, a school with a prominent name and being, hopefully turning it around to the point where we'll be a respectable school and be one of those blue chip teams.
So obviously watching you throughout your career in the Twin Cities, very familiar with what you did with the Gophers. But then as I went back to read your bio, I find out that in high school, your coach is a gentleman by the name of John Den Hartog. And those of us who cover Big Ten sports as a whole here at the network know that Natalie is one of the softball stars on the Gopher team. So I'm curious, since you guys were at Minnesota at the same time, did you and her ever swap good old war stories about her dad?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely talked, in passing. Every time we see each other, we always talk because, she was always around the team and, with her dad being the coach, and we actually have a relationship and friendship. Well, it's easy, for me to, go and talk to her anytime. And when we see each other, we're always rooting for each other. Softball season's going around. I'm rooting for her. Football season's going on. She's rooting for me. So we definitely have that type of relationship.
That's a very cool connection. I know you're also a track and field guy in high school. What events?
Shoot, you name it. Honestly, I did high jump, shot put, triple jump, 200, 100 hurdles, 300 hurdles, long jump. It's kind of doing a little bit of everything. Just not pole vaulting. I was a little too big at that point.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why you're also attractive to so many NFL teams is you are big, you are strong, you are physical, but you're also fast. At the Combine, you ran a mid 4.5 40s, really impressive for your size and position. What was that Combine experience like overall for you?
For me, it was very interesting to go through that week, honestly, just waiting, to work and perform. So, going through all the meetings earlier in the week and then understanding that, at the end of the day, we'll be out here to perform. And I was excited. I was more excited to see what everybody was doing because I worked out with a lot of the guys that were there, and a lot of guys I worked out with were there with me. So I just couldn't wait to see what we all did. The numbers, I could see for the last 8 weeks, the amount of work we put in. So at this point, this is really to see all that work come to fruition and really see what we put in and get the fruits of our labor.
All the different draft experts and draft analysts have different opinions on every single guy that they tried to break down that's part of this year's draft. Yet every single one that I read about you lists you as an A-plus effort player with a, quote, nonstop motor. I must have read that 1,000 times. So where does that come from?
That comes from, honestly, the way that Minnesota we ran our defense. Our defense had the mentality of, just always attacking and always going, no matter what, relentless effort to the ball, always, not just giving up on plays. So for me, that was just that was pride in us. And that's a pride as a defense that we took pride in making sure that we always were, if the ball's on the ground, that we're at least attempting to get towards it, at least attempting to, make a play on it. So, for that standpoint alone, that was a pride thing of our defense, and that's what we prided ourselves on as a whole.
All right, I want to read you a quote from what I thought was the best draft assessment of you that I read. This is from Kyle Krabs of the Draft Network, and he said, quote, "I'm very impressed with Mafe's ability to do a little bit of everything. He crashed off the backside to run down plays, picked up backs and carried them down the field stride for stride. He's won off the edge as a rusher. I see little reason that an athlete of this caliber can't grow into a maxed out role on a defense in the right environment." How accurate do you think that is, and what do you think when you hear that assessment?
I appreciate that. That means real to me to see the work that I put in being noticed. And on top of that, I agree, honestly, whatever role it is that I'm, acquired to play or what type of team I play for, just, going out to be my best and be the capability to do whatever's asked of me. If it's asked of me to cover running backs out of the backfield, if it's asked of me to drop into coverage or just to rush the pass rush at the edge, honestly, just find what my role is and what my assignments are and take this to my full ability and be able to just execute, honestly, at the end of the day, execute my job and play my best ball.
That's one of the most difficult things for an edge rusher to do is to be asked to drop back in coverage, especially against some of these unbelievable pass-catching running backs coming out of the backfield. And it's become such an important aspect at that position in the NFL. How have you tried to develop in that specific area?
For me, the biggest thing is just learning the concepts of, different coverages, different responsibilities, understanding like match versus spot. And just honestly looking at all the rules and working with DBs, working with, receivers and really understanding that world. That's not a world I'm used to. So if I can take an advantage by working with somebody who's in that world and, always in that world, I would take that and I'd find a way just to, make it work for me, honestly.
Who have you kind of relied on through this time once you knew the career was done in Minnesota and you're going on to the next level? Who have you gotten advice from about how to handle this next step?
I've called a lot of my former teammates that are in the NFL, honestly, and asking them what they did and what to expect and what things to, make sure I'm ready for. And, like guys I played with like Carter Coughlin, Kamal Martin, Ben St. Juice, Rashad Bateman. Those are just guys that I played with that I would just go ask them questions about what I should do. And even Antoine Winfield, people just like that were, when we play together, it's a big family here in Minnesota. So all the doors are open to me and I appreciate all of them for, opening their doors to me, giving me advice through this whole process, honestly.
And what have the conversations been like from whether they be scouts, whether they be front office staff at the NFL from the time that maybe they first approached you before or during the combine into now? What have those conversations been like? What have they entailed?
It's hit a lot. For me, I've honestly gone through every meeting and every time I meet with one of them, I'm just asking for advice and seeing what they see and what I could do. And, honestly, what things I could fix my game on. So making sure that when I first step on the field and I first get a team that I can honestly put myself in the best shoes and put myself in the best situation. So, honestly, I'm just really just taking it all in and being a sponge and really accepting all the information and tips and any type of information I can help myself.
All right, before we go, I have to know, what are your plans for next weekend? Where do you anticipate yourself watching the draft?
For me, I think I'm just going to be with my family, stay home, be close with them, and just honestly have them around me and we'll see what happens at the end of the day. And then maybe later, enjoy a celebration with some of my friends and everybody come around.
Have you seen the setup that they have in Vegas and what they're planning to do for the first couple of nights?
No, I haven't actually.
Boy, it's insane. They actually have the red carpet inside the fountains that explode at the Bellagio Hotel, and they are taking boats from the sidewalk to take the players and the red carpet folks out to the fountains at the Bellagio. I think it may be worth at least a little consideration.
That is crazy. Wow. I did not know they were doing that. Wow.
Well, Boye, no matter when we hear your name called, and we know we will hear it called early, we're going to be extremely excited for you for that night and for your future at the next level. It's been great to watch you at Minnesota. Wish you the best of luck moving forward into the NFL.